for for the design of regional forest monitoring initiatives. So I believe that a regional approach to forest monitoring, a regional approach to designing policies is important, and here's why. The truth is that most of the drivers of forest cover change do not act across, they act across borders. You have factors and drivers like illegal trade in forest products such as timber, charcoal. You have factors such as climate change which are acting on a global scale, not on a local scale. So you need that aspect of regional monitoring. Then there's also the fact that some of those regional resources that we have, forest resources, are transboundary. You have the example of the Miombo forests that are shared between Tanzania and Mozambique. You have the coastal forest and mangrove forest, which go all the way from the coastline of southeastern Somalia down to Mozambique. So there is that need. So evidently there's that need to provide better sharing, better data. There's that need to not only provide data, but that data needs to come in a systematic manner. It needs to be regular. And this is what the Eastern Africa Forest Observatory aims to do. The observatory is a platform where forest institutions in Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, and Mozambique can share their data on the forest cover trends, on the drivers of change, as well as other data in terms of carbon emissions. And this data that they share there can be used. They can use this data to monitor the implementation with RED+ implementation and progress with achieving the targets under AFRI 100. So during the development of this observatory, we figured out that for it to be successful in the long term and be sustainable in the long term, there's that need, the willingness and the ability of the institutions in the forest sector to share data is key. So what we did was to try and examine what are those barriers to data sharing in the region. We tried to look at, now apart from now, these are the barriers, how can they be overcome? What are those opportunities that exist to overcome these barriers? So what we learned was really interesting. And in terms of the characteristics of forest, the forest sector, data sharing in the forest sector in the region, we learned that data sharing is done on a needs basis. We learned that it's most of the institutions, very few institutions have written data sharing policies in place, although all of them have rules and regulations which are not written. We also learned that data, the forest sector data, is produced by multiple actors. And that's across, it's not only within the forest sector, it's across the forest sector, across ministries. So there's that need for the coordination of these actors. So in terms of the barriers, what are the barriers? I know that's the main thing. The barriers to forest data sharing in the forest sector. What we found 7 main barriers. And these are, for example, the fear of data abuse, where institutions feel that if they share data, it may be used wrongly to produce wrong results, and that it may not be cited back to them, and so on. Or maybe even the data that's shared, and this is data that maybe they consider to be sensitive or confidential, may be leaked outside there to the public or to people or other people that they did not intend it to be shared with. There's also that fear of becoming irrelevant because, like we mentioned before, there are multiple organizations and actors producing forest sector data. So there's that fear that if they share the data, they'll become irrelevant. And then there's also the whole aspect of the lack of data sharing because with RED+, we have all these multi-stakeholder processes to data sharing. So there's that whole aspect of one institution having data. Yes, they have the data, but they cannot share it because it was produced in collaboration with other actors. We have the aspect of the lack of data sharing policies to guide the process. There's also the lengthy communication protocols, which in some cases depend on who is sharing, who is requesting for the data, what kind of data is it, the nature of the data, whether it's sensitive or confidential, and also there may be other things in place, like you have to pay a prescribed fee and the like. And there's lastly the fact that this data is scattered across many institutions, so there's that need for collaboration, for coordination of all these efforts, and that may be a challenge, especially when it's within different institutions in different ministries. So what is the solution? The other thing that I'd like to mention is that another problem, one of the things that we realize is the impact of this lack of data sharing is that there's that aspect of duplication of efforts because various people are working and producing the same kind of data, they're doing the same forest monitoring activities, and so there's that need to coordinate. And this has also led to the lack of meta-analysis of the data that's existing. And if we want this to inform decision-making processes, there's a need for that meta-analysis because the truth is that decision makers need, if you present them with data, raw data like that, they may need to know what does this data mean. So this is the amount of forest. What does it mean for poverty reduction? What does it mean for the communities? So what is the solution? I like what Wangari Maathai said. She said that there are opportunities even in the most difficult moments. So what the opportunities that we identified that could be leveraged upon to improve data sharing in the region were, number one, offering incentives. And it's simple as this. When you offer incentives, people will share data when they see the benefit in sharing data. There's also the need to have that data sharing policy and framework in place to ensure that all the actors feel comfortable. They know that this data, this is how this data is going to be used, this is who is going to use it, and they know that their privacy to maybe data they may not be so comfortable sharing will be ensured. And there's also the whole aspect of creating awareness, capacity building, and creating awareness among the actors, teaching them this is why it's important, because there's that need to break that reluctance to sharing data. And the good thing is that a lot of institutions in the region are already recognizing the importance of this. And if I can give one example of Carefree in Kenya, that's the Kenya Forestry Research Institute, which has started an online knowledge management platform, and it's encouraging its scientists to share data. They're offering incentives to people who are sharing data, and then they're also offering regular capacity building activities where they train them, create awareness on why it's important to share data. And then also the need, this whole idea, this whole trend of cross-sectoral collaboration, like we've seen it in REDD+, in data, generation of data for the forest sector, that is a great thing. You know, of course it's starting and there's still a lot to be done, but that's another great opportunity. So in conclusion, I think what I can say, it's really, really important to remember that this data sharing is a shared responsibility. It needs us as researchers, practitioners, development partners to come together and work together to share data. And it's going to take time because changing mindsets takes time. So, but the benefits after all this change in mindset is going to be enormous. So thank you very much, and I'd like to invite you to check up the observatory on apps.rthmrd.org to learn more about what we're doing. Thank you.